Welcome back to the Female Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Danny, and in today's episode, I'm going to talk all about the pros and cons of group fitness classes. And the reason this kind of topic has come into my mind is because this weekend on Saturday, I ran a lifting workshop where I covered the hip thrust, Romanian deadlift, and some different split squat variations. Those being the Bulgarian split squat versus a standard split squat with both feet on the ground, and the difference between a quad dominant split squat and a glute and hamstring dominant split squat. It was a brilliant lifting workshop. I absolutely love running these. I do them in Sheffield every few months or so. So if there's something that you're interested in, it would be so lovely to have you there. So let me know, just drop me a message on Instagram if it is something that you're interested in the future. And then what I'll do when any dates do get confirmed is I'll send you a message letting you know the date, seeing if you're available and if you want to come along. They are a low cost event, so I only charge £15 per person for them. They are small groups, so you will get one-to-one time with me. And I do them as a small group workshop so that I'm able to actually get around everybody and give people one-to-one attention because of actually some of the points that I'm going to talk about in today's podcast. I want to be able to watch everyone, make sure that your form's in a really good place, give you one-to-one feedback and pointers based on, the little tweaks that you need to make to your form on your individual exercises. So it's something that I absolutely love running. They're amazing. They're really welcoming environments. Everyone that comes is a 10 out of 10 human, and everyone always leaves feeling so much more confident with their training in their own time and therefore able to get so much more out of their own sessions, as well as just enjoying getting together with like-minded people and having that training session. And if you ever have any sort of like niggles, injuries, limitations, we will always work around them as well. So please don't worry if you're in a position where, you can't train with a hell of a lot of intensity, you can't push your weights really heavy. That's not what these lifting workshops are about. They're about meeting you where you're at and working to your limitations and doing what you can given your circumstances, making sure that your movement quality is in a really good place and they are open to people of all training ages, of all levels. I have those coming into the workshops who are advanced, who've been training years, who are coaches themselves, but I also have those who are just getting into training, who are beginners to resistance training. And I love coaching all of you. So please know that you are welcome, whoever you are, whatever experience you have. And it would be such a pleasure to have you there. So, like I said, if you're interested in future workshops, drop me a message on Instagram, let me know. And then any future confirmed dates, I'll drop you a message, say, hey, are you free on this day? It'd be lovely to have you if you're available. No stress if not. There's no obligation or anything like that, but then at least I can keep you informed. So yeah, this weekend I ran that lifting workshop. Like I said, the focus was movement quality. The goal is to leave everyone feeling so much more confident in their training and able to get more out of it. But a topic of conversation during the workshop was fitness classes and how fun they can be, but how they don't often get people to where they want to be. So I wanted to talk in today's podcast about why that is, why that can be, because it's not that we need to avoid fitness classes. They can be great, especially for being social, having fun, exercising. However, they shouldn't be the foundation of our training if we want to see significant progress. But I want to be clear that fitness classes aren't a bad thing. They can be a really positive part of our lives. And I am absolutely all for my clients including them in their weekly training schedules alongside structured and individualized resistance training and potentially sometimes running or other conditioning depending on the client's goals. But they can be fun, like I said, a great opportunity for connection, which, as you've heard me speak about on the podcast, is so important for our overall health and well-being. And they can be sometimes quite good for supporting the cardiovascular fitness side of things as well, or they can be a good introduction to training for beginners when we're first starting out. And if you are a beginner first starting out in the gym, you may well see some progression from going to fitness classes, but you'll probably get to a point where that progress starts to stall if you don't have a structured resistance training program to follow, and a lot of the time, if you don't have individualized guidance. So these should be something that you do as sort of like an optional extra to your structured resistance training sessions if you want to get stronger, leaner, more muscular, improve your performance in the gym, improve your performance in a sport such as running or, any other sport that you decide to do, tennis, whatever. If you wish to improve your health and function, and if you wish to keep your injury risk low, which all of us should want to do really, because that's going to improve our quality of life. We know that getting injured is no fun whatsoever. So why would you not want to minimize that injury risk and be able to train consistently and enjoy your training and progress with that? So classes, I like to think of them as more of a form of exercise as opposed to them being training. So the reason for this is they're, like I said, they're great for movement. They can be good for supporting our cardiovascular fitness. They get us moving. They can be really fun, great, amazing, but they aren't structured enough to be effective training. They aren't controlled or person specific enough to facilitate the challenge our bodies need to adapt in the way that we want them to if we have goals that we're working towards. So, in order to build muscle tissue or strength or improve the strength of our joints, tendons, and ligaments, we ideally want to be striving for progressive overload. Now, the thing that people get wrong about progressive overload is they focus so heavily on the increase in weight or number of reps over time, which is a form of progressive overload, absolutely. And we do want to see over the long term an increase in the amount of weight that we're using for each exercise and or an increase in the number of reps we're performing at a given weight, absolutely. But progressive overload can also be improving our form. It can be slowing down a movement so that we have more time under tension. It can be adding in an isometric, which is a pause, maybe at the contraction of a rep, such as a hip thrust, for example. So progressive overload is not just increasing the number of reps we're doing or the weight that we're using. There are so many different ways of making an exercise more challenging to create a greater challenge for the working muscles that we are trying to target, which is what we need to do if we want to see progression. So, the point I'm trying to make here is that one, a lot of people get too carried away with weight or number of reps when we really need to be looking at the bigger picture when it comes to progressive overload and recognizing the importance of things like our form and the control over our movement, because that is, if there's no point in increasing the load that we're using on the number of reps we're performing if we're sacrificing our form to do so, because that's not applying an effective challenge to the working muscle. It's just increasing the weight for the sake of increasing the weight, which is not going to facilitate adaptation. What we want to do is maintain really good form, maintain control over our movement whilst we increase the number of reps or the weight that we're using. However, classes don't really tend to pay much attention to any of those things. So you often don't have the one-to-one attention that you would need to improve your form, to improve the way that you're moving. And it's all well and good doing exercises like a squat or a lunge, for example. However, if you're not doing that lunge with good form, or control in a way that it needs to be done to target the muscle groups that you're aiming to focus on, that exercise becomes pretty pointless. You're just moving. You're not actually applying an effective challenge to the working muscle. You're not training with intention, which is what we need to be doing if we want to facilitate progression. And as I mentioned at the start of the podcast, the lifting workshop that I ran, I went over the difference between a glute ham dominant split squat versus a quad dominant split squat. If you, for example, are in a group setting, if you're in a class setting and you don't know which variation you should be doing, or you're just lunging without much focus on whether you're trying to target the quads or the glutes and hamstrings, as one example of one exercise, then the exercise is so much less effective because your goal, right, could be to build your glutes and lose body fat. A lot of people have that goal who may listen to this podcast. If you are doing a lunge in a class and you have no idea what lunge variation you're doing, you could be doing a quad dominant lunge, which is not in line with your goal of developing your glutes and hamstrings. And even then, your form might not be very good doing the quad dominant lunge, and so your injury risk might be quite high. You're also not challenging yourself over time, you're not applying that progressive overload, and so you're not getting the benefit of the exercise. So you would be much better off training in a more controlled way and getting some guidance so that you can make every rep that you do in the gym 10 times more effective and so that you can train with intention. It's so, so, so important. And as I mentioned in classes, you do these movements which can be effective, but you often don't do them with the intention required to see the progress that you want to see. And then on top of that, in these classes, the goal is often getting as many reps done as possible, rather than as quickly as possible as well, rather than any consideration being given to the way that you're doing those reps. And not only is this less effective from a training standpoint, but your injury risk is also then going to be a million times higher. And if you get injured, you could be out of effective training for weeks. And that is going to interfere with your progression as well as your quality of life. Because if you can't move around normally, that's very inhibiting. So these are all things to consider. And then on top of that, with these classes, there are some exceptions of kind of small group training that is ran really well, and you have much more time and attention from the coach. You have more structured programming, but it often isn't the case in group fitness classes that you have that there. And most of the time, there is no way of measuring progressive overload because the exercises you're doing are different every time you go in and do a session. And if your exercise selection does stay the same, which is quite rare, usually the number of sets or your rest periods will vary if you have any rest in the first place, which isn't a problem in itself, is that you often go to these classes, you don't have the rest that you need to perform to the best of your ability during your sets or to recover from those sets. And when the rest periods that we have, the place where we recover, that is when we recover so that we can perform again for the next set, which is obviously essential for our progression. But our recovery time, even our rest days on the whole, that's where we adapt. That's where we see the adaptation that we want to see from our training. It doesn't happen in the moment, when we're applying the stimulus, it happens in our rest. That's where our bodies really adapt. So it's important to take that into account. But yeah, the point there was that we don't have any really good way of measuring progressive overload when we're going to fitness classes. And that is something that is going to hinder our progression and mean that it's a bit of a guessing game, which is not good for facilitating progression. Whereas if you have a structured resistance training program that is tailored to you as an individual, what you will be able to do is monitor your progression every single time you go into the gym. So you might have, say you train 4 times a week, you have two lower sessions, two upper sessions. You might have two different lower sessions and two different upper sessions, but upper one might be the same for a good while each week that you go into the gym. So you can see your progression in your data based on, how many reps that you're doing, how much weight you're using, but you will also be able to, because it's in a controlled way, because you have rest, you'll be able to pay so much more attention to the way that you're moving, the quality of your movement, make sure that that stays in a good place rather than your form being compromised because you're trying to do as many reps as quickly as possible. And you'll also, if you're working with a coach, be able to send them training videos to monitor the quality of your movement and the control that you have over those movements and your range of motion and that kind of thing to make sure that that stays in a good place as you're adding more weight or as you're doing more reps. And that is essential if you wish to actually apply a better challenge, a greater challenge to your working muscles, and therefore see adaptations in response to that. And following on from that, as I mentioned, just to reiterate this point, we need to rest between sets to be able to recover and therefore perform well. Classes don't usually allow for this, especially when they have a competitive edge to them, which can be great. Like I said, it's fun, it's good for movement, it's good for exercise, amazing. I'm all for it, do it. However, we need to rest in our structured resistance training sessions to perform well. And so, although you feel good and you get a really good endorphin release after classes, after getting a sweat on, after moving, it's not effective training if you want to build muscle tissue, progress with your performance goals, support your sporting performance, keep your injury risk low, and see progression over the long term. Alongside that, classes can often actually put quite a lot of stress on our bodies because we end up training at high intensities with minimal rest. We can often feel quite battered afterwards, and that can hinder our performance in subsequent sessions, but it can also hinder sometimes our recovery and sometimes our health. Sometimes it means you can feel like you crash later in the day when you're sat at your desk trying to work. Sometimes it impairs your cognitive function, and people don't realize how demanding classes can be. And it's not good sometimes to feel like you crash later in the day after your training sessions. Whereas if you go into the gym and you do a controlled resistance training session and you're eating enough to support that session, you won't experience that same crash that you may do after high intensity classes that don't allow you enough time to recover, where you feel quite battered afterwards. So it's really important to think about the effects that your training not only has on your training, as in like your training based progression, but also think about the effects that your training has on your quality of life outside of training. Because really, your sessions in the gym, in whatever form they come in, whether that's a class or your own sessions, should be supportive of your health and quality of life and your function in the rest of your life, rather than you feeling like rubbish in the rest of your day and the rest of your week outside of your training sessions. If you are feeling like rubbish, something needs to change, whether that be your fueling, maybe that needs to be a little bit more consistent. Maybe you need to increase your intake to support your energy requirements a little bit. Or maybe you need to make sure that you're not always going into the gym and redlining. And sometimes classes can promote that. They encourage you to get your heart rate really high to get a sweat on. But actually, if you're training at really high intensities multiple times a week, that can be very difficult to recover from and can have a negative impact on your health as well as your progression. So it's really important to bear that in mind. Like if you're someone who is seeing that actually you're not feeling good through the rest of the day, that you don't feel very good from an energy level perspective, that your periods have become irregular, these could all be signs that you're training a little bit too intensely, a little bit too frequently. So it might be wise to address that as well as making sure that you're fueling adequately. But that was a little bit of a side tangent. What I really hope is that today's podcast has not deterred you from classes because, like I said, they can be great, but just made you think about actually, are they the right thing for me and for my goals? And have you got a solid kind of foundation of resistance training in place as well as your classes, or do you need to kind of readdress that and make sure that your foundation is at least two resistance training sessions a week. And then you can have your classes on top of that as the fun social element of your training, because that is where you'll get real results. So many people come to me after going to classes for years, feeling like, yeah, it helped for a period of time, but they always get to a point where they're just spinning their wheels and they're not really getting where they want to be with their goals, whether that be to build muscle tissue, lose body fat, improve their running performance, improve their strength. Classes can be great to start with, but they often get to a point where they're just not really seeing the progress that they want to see. Is that you? Does that resonate with you? Or are you at a point where actually you're getting a lot of niggles and injuries from these classes? If so, think about making the foundation of your training resistance training. Maybe have a class or two on top of that, but consider that change because it genuinely can change the game for you. And it's such a shame to put so many hours in the gym, but not actually see the progress you want to see as a result of that. What's the point in putting in all of that time, energy, and effort not to see the rewards from it? Wouldn't you rather actually just get the right guidance so that you can make the most out of your sessions and feel like you're actually getting somewhere and you're able to achieve the goals that you want to achieve and you understand why you're doing what you're doing, as opposed to just wasting time, energy, and effort exercising for hours a week and feeling a little bit like disheartened because you're not seeing the outcome that you want to see as a result of that. That's so frustrating. And it's also so costly because your time is so precious. So why would you not want to make the most of the time that you're spending in the gym and actually see the outcomes that you want to see as a result of that? That's what I want you to have a think about off the back of today's podcast. If you have any questions or if you want to share anything with me, please drop me a message on Instagram. I love hearing from you guys. There is never any judgment from me. I'm always more than happy to help, even if you're not a paying client. Genuinely, you're more than welcome to direct message me. Love hearing from you. Always happy to help. And if you are interested in one-to-one support with your goals, let me know and we can get you booked in for a call completely free of charge, no strings attached, just so we can talk through everything in a little bit more detail and establish whether we'd be a good fit to work together. Have a wonderful rest of your day, whatever you're up to, and thank you so much for listening as always.